Hello, guys. This is episode 4 of Dubs Only Sports. I am Will. This is my co-host Dylan. Say what's up to the fans, Dylan.
What's up? What's up?
All righty. We're back at it again. If you haven't already, make sure to follow us on social media. You can find us at Dubs Only Sports on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also find us on our podcast at Dubs Only Sports, and then also on YouTube, Dubs Only Sports. Dubs Only Sports all around. Remember, it's Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, and Spotify. Those are the 5 big ones that we have. Today is December 15th. As we are recording this, it is the 15th of December, and all the college football bowl games begin tomorrow. Capital One Bowl Mania, as it is called, starts tomorrow on the 16th. It goes all the way until the 7th of January,
I don't know when the final is. Let's see.
the 8th of
January 10th.
January, 10th.
10th.
The 10th of January. 10th of January is when the national championship is. So for today,
The
we're gonna
9th.
be
The 9th. The 9th.
we're gonna be having three or no, we're gonna be having 4 separate videos on these bowl games. So the one you're watching right now is the first part, and then we're gonna have a second part, a third part, and a fourth part. The first part is gonna be about all the bowl games that don't really matter. We've decided that all the bowl games up to about Christmas are kind of the ones that don't really matter. You've got teams that you've either never heard of before or have barely winning records or have just 500 records in general and barely deserve to have a bowl game in the first place. So there's that. And then there are the games after Christmas that are like ranked matchups. You've got games like Oregon, North Carolina, UCLA, Pitt. For us, we know those ones. And then you have the New Year's Six games, but we're going to be excluding the 2 semifinal games. So the Georgia TC or the Georgia, who Georgia is it? TCU? Georgia? No, TCU's three.
Georgia, Ohio State, and then
Georgia Ohio
TCU,
State game
Michigan.
and the TCU Michigan game. So those are going to be its own thing. That's going to be the fourth part. We're going to be talking about the college football playoff, how we feel about the top 4 teams, whether or not they deserve it, because I have strong opinions about that as much as the rest of the world does. So yeah, it's going to be 4 parts to this episode. If you're watching it on YouTube, on Spotify, it's just going to be one big thing. And then if you follow us on Instagram, TikTok, or Twitter, or actually no, just on Instagram and TikTok, you'll see at least one of the highlights from our conversation, maybe one of the most controversial topics. I feel like it will be coming towards part 4 because that's when the more interesting things are. But yeah, let's get started. The first game tomorrow is the hometown lenders Bahamas Bowl. We have Miami of Ohio, who is 6-6, facing up against UAB, who's also 6-6. On the money line, UAB are minus 390. They are the favorites to win. The spread is 10.5, and the over/under is 44.5 points. UAB, Miami, Ohio. They've got UAB being a heavy favorite. Miami coming in as underdogs. How do you feel about that matchup?
I think I think that UAB is gonna win outright.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's gonna hit the over. It's a pretty low over under at 45. I think it's gonna hit the over. And but I'd say that I think Miami's gonna cover because they're 10.5 point dogs. I think they'll cover.
Okay. Yeah. I agree. I think UAB will be outright winners. I don't actually think it'll go to 45 points. I think it'll just be very back and forth. I feel like, UAB have had a pretty rocky schedule and had some really tough games, but as we see they're heavy favorites for a reason. I still don't think that's a reason to count out Miami, Ohio so easily. I would still pick UAB. I would definitely pick Miami in the spread. I think they can cover that 10.5. I feel like it will be a close game. It'll be back and forwards, but I don't think it'll be that high scoring. I'll be surprised if either team scores more than 20 points, but that's just me. I would go for the under personally, but I would have Miami in the spread and UAB on the money line. Moving on to the next game. It is the Duluth Trading Cure Bowl. We have the 25th ranked UTSA Roadrunners, who are 11-2, and then the 24th ranked Troy Trojans, who are also 11-2. we've got they're pretty evenly matched on the money line. You've got Troy minus 105, UTSA minus 115. There's no spread. Rare that you see a 0 point spread, but the over under is very high at 55 and a half. So
Yes.
Troy,
So
UTSA, who have you got for that?
I think I saw UCLA play South Alabama, and that was a very close game, and UCLA barely pulled it out. And South Alabama's in the same conference as Troy, and Troy won that conference. So I think that Troy is a good team. I'm gonna pick Troy on the money line. I think the spread has -1 for Troy. I'll take that too. And then the over under is 55. I'm gonna take the under on that. I
Mhm.
think it's gonna go under 55 and a half, or it's 55 and a half.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna go under, but I'm gonna take Troy on
Mhm.
the money line and the spread.
I feel like what a lot of people forget is that UTSA over the past few years have constantly been in the rankings. And I'm not going to
True.
sit here and say that I've been watching UTSA games because I haven't. But if the college football committee, despite how brutally horrible their rankings can be sometimes, these are the kinds of teams that they put in for a reason. And despite Troy, they do have the better ranking. I do recall UTSA being in the rankings at the beginning of the season. They've obviously lost 2 games. They're never going to see anything past maybe 15 because at the end of the day, the conference that they play in, they're not playing great teams. But if you go undefeated, then you have every right to be in the rankings, just not as high up as like top 10, anything like that. So yeah, I'm taking UTSA on the money line just because I've constantly seen them in rankings. Troy, I've seen, time and time, but UTSA over the past few years, they've been pretty consistent. With the spread, I don't see anything. I literally see zeros across the board for the spread. So, I can't really do anything about that. Again, for the over under, I don't know too much about either team. Just because it's a college football game and just because they're so evenly matched, I would go over, maybe see 40 points for each team, depending on what the defense and the offense is like. But yeah, I would have UTSA winning that game. Moving on to Saturday, the 17th of December. We've got the Wasabi Fenway Bowl. The Cincinnati Bearcats, who are 9-3, are going to be facing off against the Louisville Cardinals, who are 7-5. Louisville are the favorites with -121 on the money line. The spread is 1.5, and the over/under is 40 points. Um, Off the bat, I feel like, Louisville being or Cincinnati coming in as the underdogs, I feel like that's not a good team for a team like that's not a good thing for a team like Cincinnati. Cincinnati have battled through adversity over the past few years. I mean, you look at how they went to the college football playoffs last year. Louisville have had a bumpy road, and although Cincinnati they have easier games, you can't really write them off that easily. So I would take Cincinnati on the upset. The spread 1.5 is it's such a tight gap for Cincinnati to fill. So for that, I would just take Louisville. I think it'll be more than a point and a half. And then the over under, again, it's a college football game, two evenly matched opponents. I would just go for the over on 40. Can easily see 20 points scored by both teams. How about you? What are you thinking?
I think that Cincinnati is gonna win outright, and I see that Louisville is -2 on the spread. So I'm gonna take Cincinnati on the spread, Cincinnati on the money line, and the over/under is at 40 right now, which is low, but Cincinnati has a pretty good defense. But I still think 20 is a little bit low, so I'm gonna go on the over for that.
Yeah, for the over for 40.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's gonna go over. Yeah.
And then also on Saturday is the Cricket Celebration Bowl. We have the Jackson State Tigers, who are undefeated at 12-0, against the North Carolina Central Eagles, who are 9-2. Obviously, no surprise there. Jackson State heavy favorites, -630 on the money line. They're outright to win by 14 points, and the over under is 55. Deion Sanders just left. He was, primetime was basically the guy who made Jackson State such a huge deal in the college football world. Really brought a lot of attention to the HBCU schools. But I mean, one could argue that without his coaching, that maybe Jackson
He's
State
not
are
coaching
up
in that?
for. He's not coaching in that.
Are
No,
you sure?
I'm pretty sure he's not coaching because he's already at Colorado and he's already done the press conferences at Colorado. Maybe you want to
I
look that
think,
up right now.
yeah, we'll see.
I'm pretty sure he's not
Um,
coaching the Jackson State game. If he is coaching that game, then it's kind of a given. But if he's not, it could raise some questions that maybe under a new coach, Jackson State might not be as good. I would still take Jackson State just because they do have a lot of strong guys out there. The spread being at 14 points really could go either way. I don't know what North Carolina Central is like. I've honestly never heard of that school before today. So, the spread is kind of up in the air for me. It could be a 1 point game. Jackson State could blow them out by 20 points. Again, the things like the spreads, it's so easy to just go over on the spreads all the time because it's college football and the odds of it being such a high scoring game are very likely. So, yeah, just go Jackson State the entire way. Go for the spread, the money line, and the over under. What about you?
okay, so I see that Dion is coaching the game, and
He is
of
coaching.
course he is coaching this game. So I think that Jackson State is gonna win
Mhm.
outright. Take them. I think it's you said 14-point favorites. I'll
Yeah.
take that. So I'll take that. And then what's the over under at?
55.
I'll take the under. I'll take the under on the 55.
Alrighty. Moving on, we have the Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl presented by Stifle. I don't want to mispronounce that. Um, we have the Washington State Cougars 7-5 against the 9-4 Fresno State Bulldogs. Fresno State are the favorites coming in. They've got minus 170 on the money line. 3.5 points is the spread, and then an over under of 52.5 points. What are your thoughts about this matchup?
I'm gonna take Fresno State um all across the board, and the over unders at 53. Washington State has a decent defense, but I still think it's gonna go the over. Fresno State's quarterback, Jake Haener, is an absolute stud. I think he's one of like the top 10 to 15 quarterbacks in the country. He's a really good quarterback that no one has ever heard of, but
Yeah.
Jake Haener is a stud.
Yep.
Um, so I'm going to take Fresno State. Washington State had a decent year. They had a few close losses to Oregon and Washington. They're really close to
Mhm.
being a 9-3 team, but I'm going to stick with Fresno State. I really like their quarterback, and I think he's going to be able to put up a lot of points.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like Fresno State, I was kind of surprised that they came into this game as being the favorites because, you've got a Mountain West school going up against a Pac-12 school. Usually the Pac-12 school would dominate that game. But, Mountain West and Pac-12, they've had a little bit of a rivalry. We've had, a few Oregon Boise State games. And you look at the Washington State Boise State games. So I would also take Fresno State here on the money line. For the spread, ooh, it's tough to say that
Uh,
Washington State can keep it within 3.5. So I might just go Fresno State across the board here for the money line and the spread. The over under, um, I don't know. I feel like Fresno State, they looked really good in their championship game. I would have them as I would have that as the over 52.5. I feel like that could be covered by both teams. I've seen State score 40 points, seen them score 40 points against Oregon. So, yeah, I would have Fresno State across the board there. I'd have them, covering the spread. I'd have them getting over 52.5 points, and I'd have them winning the game. The next bowl game is going to be the Lending Tree Bowl. We have Rice, who is 5-7, under 500 team, and the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, who are 6-6. Southern Miss favorites, minus 245 on the money line. We've got 6.5 points on the spread, and then an over under of 45.5 points. I went to the USC Rice game at the beginning of the season as I live in LA. My dad's a big USC fan, so we went out to watch that game. And I mean, I know that the USC team was still like trying to figure things out at the beginning of the year. Caleb Williams, it was his first game. He's still trying to figure it out. Now he's here winning a Heisman. To be fair, in that first quarter, Rice didn't really look all that bad. I kind of like the way Rice looked. And despite the fact that they're 5-7, they've still, proven that they've won games. Again, I haven't watched either of these teams play a whole lot. I've only seen that one Rice game where they got absolutely blown out by USC's offense. So, yeah, I would just take Rice on the money line. The spread and the over under, I don't know too much about either team. So personally, I wouldn't go for anything, but 45.5 does seem a little bit low for two teams that are out of the Power Five conferences. So that's just me personally.
So contrary to what you said, I also watched that USC Rice game, and
Hmm.
at the first quarter they actually stood with USC, but then USC totally blew it open. I think they won like
Yeah.
66 to 40, like they just
Yeah.
obliterated them. So because of that, I know USC is clearly going to be better than Rice, but I think that Southern Miss is going to win the game. I think it's going to go the under. It's at 45.5. I think it's going to go the under, and I'm going to take Southern Miss to cover the spread of 6.5.
Oh, you have it as, oh, is this? Oh, yeah, it is 6.5. So I'm looking at a
Yeah.
different game now. Okay, next game, the New Mexico Bowl between SMU and BYU. Both teams are 7-5. SMU coming into the game, one minus 170 on the money line. The spread is 3.5 points. Over under is 64. What have you got for me?
SMU scores a ton. Their defense is not that good, but they score a ton of points. That's why you see the over under at 64 for this game, which is a high over under.
Yep.
I think I'm gonna take SMU to win the game. I'm gonna
Mhm.
take BYU to cover because they're 4-point dogs, and I think I'm gonna take the over. I'm gonna take the over because I mean, 64.5 is a big number, but I think that SMU's defense is really bad, and I think their
Mhm.
offense is really good. So I feel like it's
Yeah.
just gonna be like a scoring fest.
Yeah. As an Oregon fan, I watched BYU play personally, and you can't forget the fact that BYU was ranked so high. And it took them a few weeks of losses for them to actually drop out. And again, this goes back to my argument about how, despite how bad the college football committee is, they definitely see things in certain teams like the BYUs, like the UTSAs, the Troys. They see things in them, which is why they put them in the rankings. I feel like if I were to guess, they played that game against Oregon. They, got beat by what was it, like 15,
20,
17
20,
point? Yeah,
yeah, so,
something
like a lot.
crazy
It was
like
a lot,
that.
yeah.
And like morale just goes down because Oregon was behind them in the rankings by a good 10 spots after they lost their first game to Georgia. And yeah, but at the end of the day, BYU still looked really good against the team like Oregon. And in that BYU game, it looked like they had figured it out, and BYU still looked good. They still scored 20 points, even though they got absolutely shut out. They still scored 20 points. I feel like a team like SMU won't be a challenge for them. I can see BYU winning this game. I can see BYU winning this game. I can see them. I can see them covering the spread. Over under is a little high for me. I don't think there will be, 30 points scored by each team, or maybe one team blowing one out by 10 or more points. So I would definitely go under on that 64 point over under. But yeah, I would say BYU just because what I saw how I saw them play against Oregon. Next is the SRS Distribution Las Vegas Bowl. It is between the 6-6 Florida Gators and the 14th ranked 9-3 Oregon State Beavers. Oregon State coming in as heavy favorites, minus 370. They're expected to win by 10 points, and the over-under is 53. Now, we're both giving each other that look, and I feel like I already know what you're gonna say, but I want to
I
see if we're
think
on the same page.
I think I'm gonna check this, but I think Anthony Richardson, the Florida quarterback, is not playing in this game. I think that's why
Okay.
the spread is so yeah, he's gonna skip the bowl game. So because of that, I'm gonna take I mean
Mhm.
honestly, I've Florida beat Utah in the first game of the year, but otherwise they've
Yeah.
been kind of terrible. And Oregon
Yeah.
State has come on strong at the end of the year. I mean, they shouldn't have won that Oregon game. That was a fluky game, and Oregon gave them the
Yeah.
game. But
Hmm.
Oregon State's defense was probably the best defense in the Pac-12, along with Utah. They have a very good defense. Their quarterback is terrible and throws a ton
Yeah.
of interceptions, but their run game is very good. And I just think that I'm gonna take Oregon State to win the game. I think it's gonna go the under. Over under is 53. It's gonna hit the under.
Mhm.
But Oregon State at 10-point favorites is too much. I'm gonna say that Oregon State wins, but Florida covers.
Okay. Yeah. Me personally, I look at Florida as not, well, as of right now, I don't look at Florida as kind of like a quarterback school. I feel like, you could really have any dude like at quarterback at Florida, and they have the receivers and the running backs to make those plays for the quarterback, whether it's a good pass or a bad pass. So despite the injury for Florida's quarterback, I'm still gonna go with Florida. I'm gonna go with them on the money line. For the spread, 10 is a lot
Gonna
of
cover it.
points.
No, they're gonna cover. No, like they're
Yeah,
10-point underdogs, so they're gonna cover that.
yeah.
They're gonna cover.
So and then the over under 53. I could see that working out. I could see two, really good offenses, but kind of mid defenses going up against one another. Oregon State displayed their defense against Oregon. I don't think it'll happen back to back. It's just,
You think
I've been
so?
watching I've been watching Oregon State a while, and I know how they are in bowl games, and it's just not what you'd expect in the regular season. So yeah, despite their quarterback being injured, I'm still gonna go with Florida for the big upset. Big upset for Florida. Next game is going to be the Frisco Bowl. We have the North Texas Mean Green at 7-6 against Boise State, who we were just talking about, and 9-4. Boise State, huge, 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 huge favorites, minus 390 on the money line, 10.5 spread, and almost a 60-point over under. I'm just gonna say it. Boise State, I don't see how they can lose this game, to be honest. They look great in the Mountain West. If they lose this game, I clearly don't know enough about college football. Yeah,
Yeah.
they beat North Texas. They cover the spread. The over under 60 again, a little bit high for me, so I would go under for that. But for you, what do you think for that?
Yeah, Boise State across the board. I think Boise State's gonna win, cover the 10.5, and it's gonna go under 60 or 59.5.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the easier ones. Every year there are those bowl games where you have a team that's obviously going to win. Boise State, the Mountain West, people, I feel like people don't really realize how competitive it is in the Mountain West. You look
It's a
at
good
teams like San
conference.
Diego
Yeah.
State, San Jose
Yeah.
State, Fresno State, Boise State, a lot of states now that I'm thinking about it, but
Yeah.
they have some competition over there.
Yeah.
Um, Next game is the Myrtle Beach Bowl. We've got the 8-4 Marshall Thundering Herd against the 6-6 Yukon Huskies. Yukon is short for Connecticut for anyone out there. We just call them Yukon. Yukon's a basketball school, specifically a women's basketball school, but they went 6-6 this year in football. Marshall are still heavy favorites, minus 400 on the money line, minus 10 on the spread, and then the over under is 41 points. Again, I think they did a really good job. Marshall, a football school, Connecticut, still trying to get to that point where they can really call themselves a football school. So again, Marshall on the money line, Marshall on the spread, Marshall on the over. 41 points. I feel like they can easily pass that. How about you?
I think UConn actually had a decent year for their standards for football with former UCLA head coach Jim Mora
Yeah.
at the head. But yeah, Marshall beat Notre Dame this year. I know Notre Dame had an off year, but they still beat Notre Dame. They're in a good conference with South Alabama and Troy. I like that team. I think Marshall's gonna win outright. Marshall's gonna cover the 10.5, and it's definitely gonna go over 41. I say that, but I think it's gonna go over 41.
Okay. Yeah. Next one, the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. They're just making these bowl games. Like, I'll be fair,
It's
there are 40
crazy.
bowl games,
These
and I love the bowl
sponsorships,
games,
yeah.
but the names are ridiculous.
I mean, these sponsors,
Um,
bro, are crazy.
yeah. So in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, we've got the 8-4 Eastern Michigan Eagles against the 7-4 San Jose State Spartans. Very kind of evenly matched. San Jose State do come in as the slight favorites with minus 180 on the money line. The spread is only 3.5 points, so a very close game. And then a 54.5 point over under. And it's a close matchup, but who do you see pulling away from in this bowl game?
I'm gonna stick with I don't know much about either of these teams, but I'm gonna stick with San Jose State winning the game. I'm gonna take them minus 3.5 because I think they're gonna win. So 3.5 is a little more than a field goal, but I think they can win by that. And then over under 54.5. I'm gonna go the under. I'm gonna go the under on that.
Yeah, I agree with you on everything. Unlike you, I have watched San Jose State play. I've got, people going to San Diego State, going to Fresno State, going to UNLV, all these kinds of schools. So, I do get intrigued to see what the football team is like. And San Jose State, despite their record, they do look really good again. I've been saying it this entire episode. Mountain West is just something that's very frowned on upon by a lot of the college football committee. But in recent years, they've definitely made a name for themselves, a name for themselves across all sports. Not just football, but basketball as well. So
True.
yeah, San Jose State money line spread as well, and then under 54.5 points. I don't think they'll be scoring that many points that game.
Mhm.
The next bowl game is the roofclaim.com Boca Raton Bowl. The 8-4 Liberty Flames are going to be facing off against the 8-5 Toledo Rockets. Toledo come in as the favorites, minus 205 on the money line. The spread is 5 points, and the over/under is 54 points. I honestly thought this would be more evenly matched, but for you, who do you got winning? Who do you got winning that game?
Okay, so I saw that former Liberty coach Hugh Freeze has got hired by Auburn, right? I think he got hired
Yeah.
by Auburn.
Yep.
And even though they're relatively they're more big underdogs than I thought they were gonna be. I thought that it was gonna be a closer spread, but they're relatively big underdogs compared to what I thought. With that being said, I'm still gonna take Liberty. They've had a ton of good wins this year. I mean, they lost to Wake Forest by a point. They beat Arkansas, they beat BYU. They ended the
Yep.
season really badly by losing 3 straight games, but they were very close games. And I just
Mhm.
think that they're gonna bounce back from that. So I'm gonna take Liberty. It's a little risky because they've ended the year badly, but I think
Yeah.
that Liberty is gonna win. Um, they're gonna cover the 5 point spread, and the over/under's at 54. I'm gonna go the under.
Yeah, I mean, again, I agree with you on everything. I feel like, Liberty, you mentioned that Wake Forest game, that Arkansas game. It really makes you beg the question of, well, was that the team or was that the coach? Because, that's the big question being asked now. I feel like Liberty's they're going into that game with a big chip on their shoulder without Hugh Freeze there. So, and I feel like they'll be able to perform. A lot of people are picking Liberty anyways, but it's still up in the air on who's going to win. Like you said, I feel like, the money line is very, it's a lot farther off than I thought it would be. I thought both teams would definitely be in the under, but we see Liberty in
Yeah,
the over. So, for bettors out there, that's a good sign. But yeah, I would have Liberty for the money line, the spread, and again, under 54 points. These are not two teams that score a lot of points. So under on the
agreed. Yeah.
54. Next game is the R+L Carriers New Orleans Bowl. We've got your favorite 10-2 South Alabama Jags against the
Yeah.
8-5 Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. South Alabama, our favorites, minus 195. They've got the minus 4.5 point spread and the over under at 56 points. You were at the game where Alabama
Firsthand, yeah.
almost lost to South Alabama. So, and based off the fact that the fact that UCLA almost lost to South Alabama, will that be your reasoning into why South Alabama is going to win this game for you?
South Alabama's a good team. I mean, they lost to UCLA by 1 point. They lost to Troy in a one possession game, and otherwise they'd be undefeated and potentially be ranked in the top 20.
Mhm.
And they have that team no one knows a lot about because they're in a very small conference, but
Yeah.
a lot of their players are transfers from high level Power Five schools.
Mhm.
So I think that South Alabama is going to win this game relatively easily. I'm going to take them minus 4.5. I'm going to take the under because they have a very good defense for
Mhm.
like for their competition. So they have a good defense. I'm going to take the under. It's over under is 56. I'm going to take the under. South Alabama across the board.
For me, I'm actually going to go the opposite way, and I'm going to say Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky, one of those teams, again, they don't have a strong schedule. They play in Conference USA, with teams like UTSA, like North Texas. But, you look at a team like UTSA, who's expected to be the best in that conference, and they still held them to a one possession game. They lost them 31-28. Still a good game, but across the board, they played teams like Indiana, Auburn. They played Rice. They played FAU. FAU is supposed to be one of those teams as well that's, you don't hear about, like Lane Kiffin basically built
Lane
them
Kiffin,
up for
yeah.
a while, and they've held the program strong, but they beat them by a point in their last game of the season. Auburn, they did get absolutely trounced by, but again, they're playing in Auburn, so what can you
Yeah.
really
It's not,
expect?
yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna go with Western Kentucky. I liked what I saw from them this season. Like the five losses are obviously, it's tough to it's a hard pill to swallow, but they made it to the bowl game. I think they'll come out ready to play. So yeah, and it is kind of a home game for South Alabama, being that New Orleans is so close. It's a lot closer than Western Kentucky is. But yeah, I would have West Kentucky beating South Alabama. The spread, have them covering that, obviously. And then the over under. Ooh, 56. Again, some of these over unders are a lot of points, but Western Kentucky and South Alabama are both teams that score a lot of points. So I'm gonna go with the over on 56 and
Okay, okay.
have both those teams scoring more than 56 points, which is a lot, but I think it can be done. Next game is the Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl. What? The Armed Forces Bowl. We've got the 6-6 Baylor Bears and the 9-3 Air Force Falcons. Now, Baylor, despite being despite having such a horrible record, are the heavy favorites in the money line, minus
Yeah.
220. The spread is 5.5 points, the over under being 48.5 points. Air Force had some interesting games this year for sure.
Yeah.
But from that matchup, what do you think? You think, Baylor
I'm gonna
being Big 12 conference, being heavy favorites, you just going to go with that?
Yeah, I think Baylor had a very disappointing year. They were ranked in like the top 15 to start the year, and they lost to BYU early. They almost beat TCU at the end of the year, but they lost that. But they have a good defense. Their offense is a little skeptical, but like I don't think Air Force's offense is going to pose too many problems for them. So I'm going to take Baylor. I'm going to take them minus 5.5. And I think it's going to go under 48.5 because I think both these teams run the ball a decent amount and they have good defenses. So I don't think it's going to, I think it's going to be a slower game and it's going to be a lot of running and a lot of just keeping the ball away from the other team.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I would have Baylor despite, them having, because like you think about it, Air Force are 9-3. They clearly can win games, but it's all about the strength of schedule. Baylor plays in the Big 12, which, might not be the strongest conference, but still poses some threats like TCU this year, especially teams like Kansas
Exactly.
State, Texas, right before they leave for the SEC. So yeah, I would have Baylor winning the game. The spread, I'd have them covering that. And the over under, again, Baylor, one of those teams that scores points, 48.5 doesn't seem like that far of a deal. I feel like Baylor can easily put up 30 points against Air Force. Then it's just up to Air Force to score, a couple of touchdowns here and there. So yeah, I'd have Baylor across the board. The next game is going to be the Radiance Technologies Independence Bowl. We've got Houston, who are 7-5, going against Louisiana Lafayette, who are 6-6. Houston coming in as heavy favorites, 270 on the money line. Only expected to win by a touchdown though, and the over/under is 58 points. Again, two teams that we don't necessarily watch too much, but just based off of that alone, what can you get from that?
I think I'm gonna take Houston. They've had some good years, like in the recent past. I'm gonna take Houston for this game. I mean, so has the Raging Cajuns. I mean, Louisiana's a decent football school. But I'm gonna take Houston in this. Minus seven's a little much. It's a little. I feel like it might be a closer game. So I'm gonna take Louisiana to cover, but over under at 58. I feel like that's a lot, and I just feel like I think that's gonna go in the under. I know it's like college football, a lot of scoring, but I feel like that one's gonna hit the under.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I've got Houston winning, like you said. They've definitely been up there in the rankings for the past couple of seasons. For them to finish 7-5 and have a bowl game against a team who's 6-6, especially for a team like Louisiana who plays in such a bad conference, I feel like this is kind of easy for Houston. 7 is very generous towards Louisiana. I think that spread can easily be covered. It definitely won't be a one-score game. And the over as well. You've got two teams playing in decent conferences going up against one another. That's just a formula for having a high-scoring game. So I would take the over on the 58 again. Maybe see both teams score 30, maybe even 40 points. I know Houston has done it before this year. So yeah, Houston across the board, the over, the spread, and the money line. So if you're watching this on YouTube, this is going to be the end of the first part of the video. We're now getting into the more decent games. We're on the 23rd of December right now. So we're going to do the 23rd up until the New Year's 6 games. And then that's going to be our part. That's going to be a part 2 video. Our part 3 is going to be the New Year's 6 games. And then the part 4 is going to be the specific on the college football playoff games and how that's working out. But if you're listening on the podcast, we're just going to keep on going. The first game up is going to be the Union Home Mortgage Gasparilla Bowl. Really even matchup. 7-5 Wake Forest against a 6-6 Mizzou. Mizzou is short for Missouri for anyone who's confused. Wake Forest, again, the money lines both under. We've got Missouri more of a favorite we've got Wake Forest more as a favorite at -115 over Missouri's -105. The spread 1 point. I mean, you can't write it any closer, but the over under is heavily high at 60.5 points. You brought up that game that Wake Forest had against South Alabama, right? Or Liberty, that's right. You bring up that game that Wake Forest had against Liberty, and I remember watching the clips of that game and thinking, yeah, Wake Forest are not a great team. To this day, I still think that the SEC match, because Wake Forest are an ACC team.
ACC, yeah.
And Missouri are an SEC team.
SEC, yep.
I feel like that SEC, I just feel like whenever you take any SEC team against an ACC team, you should always go for the SEC team. It's a much harder conference to play in, a lot more competition. I would have Missouri winning the game as kind of the upside, even though they are pretty evenly matched. And then for the spread, got them covering that 1 point. I mean, kind of forced to at that point. And then over under 60.5. I think it'll be low scoring. I think, it'll be rare if we see either team score more than 30 points. But for you, what do you think? You've got an ACC team against an SEC team. What do you like in this matchup?
I think the ACC was terrible this year, and I mean Wake Forest almost beat Clemson, but Clemson was not that good, so it wasn't saying too much.
They're still in the rankings though, still in the top 10 though.
I don't know about that, but like that's a little bit much. But so I'm gonna take Missouri in this. They had a few close losses, like they almost beat Georgia actually, so they've had a few good games, but I think that Missouri's defense is gonna make the difference here, just like an SEC defense. Against this Wake Forest offense is good, but I just don't see them winning this game. Yeah. I'm gonna take Missouri on this to cover and to win outright, and then I'm going to take the under because 60.5 is a lot. I know Wake Forest's offense is good, but I don't think they're going to score that much against this team. Yeah. Not over under 60. That's too much.
Like it's too, they're evenly matched. Like it would be kind of hard to see them score, like I said, more than 30 points. Yeah. The next game is going to be the Easy Post Hawaii Bowl. We've got Middle Tennessee, who's 7-5, against San Diego State, who are 7-5. San Diego State coming in heavy favorites. Only expected to win by a touchdown, which is surprising to me. And the over-under is 49.5 points. Just to get my opinions out the way, because it's really not that long. San Diego State, just the better team overall, I feel. They nailed it with the money line. The spread, I'm kind of surprised about. I feel like San Diego State can easily beat Middle Tennessee by more than a touchdown. And again, the over-under, you've got two teams that tend to score a lot of points. So I'm going to go over on the 49.5 points there.
I think San Diego State's going to win. it's a lot closer. I mean, San Diego State, it's in Hawaii, so Tennessee and San Diego State, it's a lot closer for San Diego State. So
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be more of a home game for San Diego State. I think they're gonna win the game. Um, -7, yeah, I'm gonna take that. I think they're gonna cover the spread, and 49.5 isn't too much. So I'm gonna take the over on that.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna be getting into a few games here in our part two that are just kind of like meh games, but they are coming
Bad
in
game.
after Christmas.